Michael Van Runkle here for HotCars.com. I'm back out in the desert with a Polaris RZR Pro XP4 Ultimate. It's really fun being out here driving it again, and I wish I had more time with it. Check out my previous video to learn a little bit more about the basics of what makes this thing so awesome. When I got the RZR, I just basically jumped in and started driving, trying to have some fun. But it did come with some documents, a disc, multiple user's guide and owner's manuals, but whoever reads those things. It turns out maybe for the RZR I should have though, because there's a lot of details that I didn't quite understand. Luckily, Polaris set me up with Pat McCardle, the director of product planning for the RZR, and he walked me through every little detail about this machine, from the drivetrain to the suspension, all the goodies that you might not even discover. Let's go over the drivetrain, the four-wheel drive system, the shocks and springs, the adjustable coilovers. In the meantime, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. When I talked to him, he very specifically referred to the RZR as having all-wheel drive. So I asked what that's about, because I've really sort of enjoyed the two-wheel drive because it's a lot more squirrely and tail-happy, and yet noticed how much of a difference it makes when you turn the four-wheel drive switch on with that little toggle. Basically, from the CVT, it's driven by a belt to the rear differential, and then a prop shaft to the front is always spinning as long as you're driving. That rear differential is a spool, so it's basically like a rear locker at all times. When the ECU detects 3% wheel spin from the rear wheels, an electromagnetic clutch at the front differential activates the front wheels, which are essentially locked, but he said they do allow for a little bit of differentiation just because it would be really hard to steer if it didn't. Still, he said if you burn out from a standstill with all four wheels spinning, you'll kick up gravel from all four. So it's not like when you have an open rear differential on a rear wheel drive street car and you just see the one wheel peel out. As I explained in the previous video, this thing's got a 2-cylinder turbocharged engine, 925cc, puts out 181 horsepower. It's got a 60mm turbo, it's pushing 17 PSI of boost, and it has peak torque of 122 pound-feet. That's all routed through the CVT, which seems like a weird choice to me. So I asked him, what's up with the CVT? And he explained that that's sort of related to Polaris's history with snow machines and ATVs. The CVT just makes it super easy for anyone to drive. You just mash the throttle pedal. You don't have to worry about shifting gears or using a clutch or what gear you're in while you're rock crawling. It's just a get in and go type thing. Now, the highest the CVT will sort of let the engine go is 8,300 or 8,400 RPM. If not, if you're trying to go higher than that, it sort of backs off a little, and it's not gonna let you get up into like the 10,000 RPM range. There is a hard limiter if you go too hard, so you won't cause engine damage, but really it's gonna be pretty difficult to get there unless you're like flooring it from a standstill. I don't even know how you could even trick the CVT into doing that. Polaris calls the whole suspension system, including the Fox Live Valve shocks, dynamics. When you turn the key on, the screen comes on, and it allows you to control between 3 different modes: comfort, sport, and firm. There are a lot of different screens available in the center console, so it takes a little bit to get used to it. Here's that turbo boost right here, and that allows you to know how much boost you've got going. I've never really seen it go more than a third of the way up the gauge, but maybe I'm not pushing it hard enough. When you push this button here, you can switch to the screen that shows how dynamics is working. You've got all 4 wheels here. You've got your speed, and you've got an accelerometer. Now that accelerometer pairs with the active suspension to allow Polaris to check what the vehicle's doing. They claim 200 times a second, and adjust the shocks accordingly. So if you're turning really hard or counter steering, they'll firm up the outside or inside or front or back if you're braking or accelerating to make it as smooth as possible across all 3 ranges of how the shocks work. The accelerometer can also detect jumps, and when you're up in the air, it'll firm up everything so that when you land without damaging anything. So when you're driving, it's doing whatever mode you have it in. As soon as you turn the RZR off, it automatically goes into the firm setting so that if you've got it in a trailer, it doesn't lean a bunch and rock and roll. It's more steady while you're driving around. So I'm going to turn it on. There we go. Now I want to be in the comfort mode here. Now I'll turn it off. get out, and it's firming up the shocks on purpose now. So if I shake it, well, I lost a GoPro, but you can actually see that it lifted up about an inch. But now if I turn it on, did you see that? It dropped back down and went into the comfort settings. That shows you just how much of a difference these shocks are making. And I've done the same lap up a sort of gnarly little winding trail in every different suspension setting, and it makes a huge difference in the driving feel. And then you can play with two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive. My favorite so far is probably the comfort mode, but that brings us to the adjustable coilovers. You can see these coilovers are pretty hardcore. The threads go all the way up to here on the shocks and down to here. You've got the remote system here. It's got an electronically controlled valve up top, and it's basically enormous considering this is only a 2,000 pound machine. Now, Pat explained to me that you can adjust these by about an inch. You don't want to go too much more than that because you're going to really mess with the whole chassis dynamics, no pun intended. But you want to make sure that you do it evenly, otherwise you're really going to mess it up and sit all cockeyed, and they have had customers complain about that. I'm curious, I would say maybe make them softer, and then after that, try the firm settings for the shocks themselves. And speaking of that kind of adjustment, I did ask what kind of tire options they would recommend. They said you can go 1 inch bigger. Pat said you can't really go much larger than that because you risk rub, especially with the suspension at full compression, and it's going to mess up the steering. That's not too bad, and you really don't need much bigger tires because this thing is so small and nimble. The only thing is, it doesn't have a ton of grip when you get up to going about 50 on a flat dirt road. It gets pretty squirrely and hairy, but that's just part of having this mid-engine supercar layout that's so awesome about the RZR. It's just a lot of fun. This time we're gonna put it in firm. There's a lot more grip. This time we're going to put it in firm with four-wheel drive. Straighter. This time we're going to do comfort and four-wheel drive. That's probably the fastest, but I like two-wheel drive just for the fun. Back here in the cockpit, there are some other goodies that I think are worth covering. One cool thing is the maps and trail system. I'll switch over from the gauges here showing the shock status over to the map. And you can see all these trails that I've gone on. And there's also a way to set up a group ride so that if you're with another person in a RZR or you're off-roading with anyone in a car, you can set it up with your phone or straight up vehicle to vehicle between RZRs. It's getting really hot out here in the desert, just sitting around in the sun. The RZR does not have air conditioning. I kind of wish it had at least some like cold air inlet ducts in the footwell to help things stay a little bit more comfortable. But I'm happy I got to share with you some of the more technical design and development details that make the RZR so much fun, even though it does get pretty hot. I'm gonna call it for the day. I hope you learned something from watching this. Thank you for watching, and once again, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out.